Alrighty, everybody, it is currently Sunday, March 30th, 2025, and I'm coming at you live from within the cavernous, empty stomach of a large elephant. And I just want to start off this episode talking a little bit about the White Lotus. Big show, major show going on right here. I just watched season 2. I am on season 3 now, but I just watched season 2. And as I was watching this show, and if you don't know, it's like this show about like how rich people are out of touch, and it's like, yeah, they're rich. I like it. Like it's a good show. It's a really funny, good show. It's mostly just funny. There's really nothing else to it, but like I guess some people watch it and they're like, "Oh my god, rich people are so out of touch." And it's like, "Yeah, that's like the whole point of being rich is to be as out of touch as possible. The whole point of being rich is to just escape all like you peons and your peasants and your dumb fucking problems and just go away to some shitty fucking island somewhere, some man-made, some man-constructed island. Everything about that island is fucking constructed from its culture, its people. The goal of being rich is essentially to create Westworld, and that's what Elon Musk is up to. And when people are like, "Oh my god, why would he do that?" It's like, are you surprised? If you had $100 billion, you'd be like, "Yeah, no, you aren't people. I'm a person. The rest of you guys aren't." He probably looks at people with like $100 million and he's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? How do you only have 100 fucking million?" But that is the point of being rich, is to just escape reality as a whole, right? Because reality sucks. It does suck. Or you can be really, really poor and escape reality. That's the other option. There's like two ends of the extreme, but you got to be like, and you got to be poor in America too. If you're poor in like fucking China or Africa or some shit like that, you're not. Reality is getting more real than ever if you're poor there. But if you're poor in like America, you can just take a bunch of fentanyl or like meth or whatever and just completely escape reality. But that is the point of being rich, is to escape reality. But anyway, I was watching this show and I came to like the realization that like women have been using the same tricks on men since like the beginning of time, and men fall for it every single time. So I am gonna, I guess, spoil the show a little bit, but it came out a year ago, and also there's really no spoilers in the show. There is like a big like whole murder mystery that's like the whole season is culminating towards, but like no one gives a shit about that. It's just a funny show. But like one of the main plot points within the show is that there's this prostitute, and the prostitute, she slept with like this kid's dad or whatever, and then she like, the dad's like, "All right, you gotta fuck off. I got a wife at home. I need to stop doing this." And so he tells the prostitute to fuck off, and she's like, "Fuck, where am I gonna get my money from?" She sees this like little fucking like rich kid, very stereotypical rich kid, like la 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 la, just skipping through life, and she jugs him. She gets the fucking bag from him. She secures a fucking fat bag from this dude. I'm talking 50K euros. She secures from this little guy, and she does it using a trick as old as time, literally as old as time. I was like thinking, I was like, where have I like thought about this trick before? I'll get to it. But she uses like the whole "I'm in an abusive relationship" trick, which is ridiculous, especially fucking today, dude. I get it, it's Italy or whatever, where like dudes still like walk up to random women and like double cheek grab them and like jiggle their asses and shit. But like, I don't, you can't just like hop on a train and go somewhere. Like, and it's very obviously like a setup. Like she keeps going back to like her pimp or whatever for the money, and like this trick has been used since the beginning of time. And I realized where I've heard this trick before, dude. It's fucking Helen of Troy, right? This isn't in the story, but like this is what I imagine happened. Like Helen of Troy was like talking to Paris, and she was like, "Fucking Odysseus is an asshole. He like fucks with me, and like, yeah, he's not like physically abusive, but like he manipulates me. He gaslights me all the time." And then fucking Hector was like, I think it was Hector was like, "Damn, I gotta help you, babe. Oh, I can't believe he treats you like that. That's so fucked up." And so he steals fucking Paris from Odysseus. He steals, or not Paris. Fucking Paris steals Helen from Troy, aka Sparta, and then they go fucking hog wild and have a 20-year war. And she's like, "What? What did I do wrong? What are you mad at me now, Odysseus? Oh my god, I can't believe this." But that story is kind of a chick story. It's all about how Odysseus like fights for like fucking 30 years or whatever to get back to Helen of Troy. And like when he gets back, she like hasn't cheated on him or anything. And it's like, dude, women cheat on their husbands when they go on like a 6-month deployment in like the army or whatever, and they like call every day and they're still cheating on them. It's like, dude, she definitely, and can you even blame her at that point? Yeah. she created the whole situation in my mind. Obviously, not in the Homer wasn't. Homer didn't like break up with a girl, and he was like, "Fucking all women are bitches, dude." It's just my little fucking lonely incel brain thinking of that. But that is what I thought of. In season 3 of White Lotus, it's going pretty good so far. But I gotta talk about Patrick Schwarzenegger for a minute, because and it pains me to say this, that dude's fucking hilarious. And it pains me to say this, obviously, because he's Arnold Schwarzenegger's son. And people do talk about that shit where they're like, oh, he's a Nepo baby. And it's like, I don't think you fundamentally understand what Hollywood is or like acting is. Acting isn't being skilled. Same with like music. Even like art really isn't about being like painting and like sculpture. Really, in this day and age, isn't about being skilled. It's about being hot or being like interesting, right? Like, no actors are actors because they're like really good at acting. Like Steve, you think Brad Pitt is the best fucking actor in the world? You think Daniel Day-Lewis is the best actor in the world or whatever? No, they're just hot. And so people were like, all right, we'll put this dude on a TV because he's hot and people want to look at him. And then, you know, ipso facto, they kind of became, obviously Daniel Day-Lewis is the fucking goat. I'm not talking shit about Daniel Day-Lewis, but these aren't like the most like insanely skilled. There's definitely like the best actor in the world is definitely like some grotesque ass dude to look at. Like I might be the best actor in the world, but because I'm ugly, no one will ever know it, right? It's that sort of thing. But this dude, he is so fucking funny, and he's Arnold Schwarzenegger's son and shit. But he's a hunk, dude. I think he's hotter than Arnie. I'm gonna say that right now. He's taller than Arnie, and he's not too jacked, right? Arnie was a little maybe over jacked. He's got a nice toned build, a nice Michael Phelps build. Like if Michael Phelps didn't look like a chimpanzee mixed from an elf from Harry Potter, that would be Schwarzenegger. And he's got like a boyish, mischievous face. Mischievous face. He's a fucking hunk, dude. He might be better than Hemsworth. He might be hotter than Pitt. I'm gonna say it, dude. Just like the way he is, the way he carries himself. I look at him and I'm like, oh my god, Patrick, you're so funny. That's what I do when I watch that show. But we're not here to talk about White Lotus. We're here to talk about Roman von Ungern-Sternberg, who we're just gonna call Russ. All right, because you can kind of ignore the von in there. Von is just like means he's like of the house of Ungern-Sternberg. So Nikolai Robert Maximilian Freiherr von Ungern-Sternberg, right? That's how you know this guy's fancy. He's got a name with like fucking 50 other names in it. That's like a peasant name. Like when people started coming to Ellis Island or whatever, like most of like the European peasants weren't even like given middle names, and so the people at Ellis Island just gave them middle names or whatever, or they like made their first name their last name. Like a lot of the last names you hear, especially like the Italian ones, are like those are people's first names, but like the people at Ellis Island were like, fucking, I can't understand you. I'm just gonna make this is your new name. They were just giving people new names and shit. But he's got a long ass name. And he was born in Gruz, Austria on January 10th, 1886. Russ's father was a Baltic German, Estonian. And if you don't know Estonia, it's like just below Finland, right? It's like kind of top middle of Russia, the first country west of that, and like south of Finland, that's Estonia. And like the Baltic region is Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And so he's an Estonian like nobleman, and his mother was a German noblewoman. Russ was part Hungarian and claimed to be a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. And that's why people call, if you've ever heard in like World War I movies especially, they'll be like, we gotta go kill the Huns or whatever. They refer to like people in like kind of like parts of Eastern Europe, like Estonia, definitely, Finland for sure, and then like Hungary for some reason, they call them the Huns, and I think Bulgaria too, because when Genghis Khan was like fucking shit up, he got all the way over there. He got all the way to like Eastern Central Europe. And so he claimed to be a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. In 1888, Russ's family moved to Reval, the capital of the Governorate of Estonia in the Russian Empire. So this is back when Russia was like a fucking, you know what I mean, like the Romanov, the fucking, what's that guy's name, Rasputin. This is like Rasputin times, kind of. And his parents divorced in 1891. And it's, dude, what do you got to do? I guess because they're rich. Like if you're rich, the rules don't apply to you, obviously. But I feel like especially in the Russian Empire, like the old like orthodoxy and shit like that, I can't imagine they were letting many people get divorced. So I wonder what the fuck was going on here, dude. This must have been a crazy ass relationship. To get divorced in like 1888 or 1891, it's fucking same year basically. Fucking back in the day, time and like shit didn't advance the way it does now. People like look at like the 90s or whatever as like ancient history, but like back then it was like 30 years would pass and literally nothing in the world would change. Just like nothing at all would change. That's like the time period we're in. We're kind of getting out of that time period, especially when we get into World War One, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But yeah, what do you got to do to get a divorce in fucking 1891? That's got to be that's got to be wild. It's got to be all the woman too. Like in terms of like who caused the divorce, it has to be like the dude being like, fucking can't stand. Because I can't imagine like, even though she was a noble woman, he was also a noble man. So it's not like fucking he was like super far above her or anything. So something fucked up must have happened here. That fucked up little Russ. But his parents divorced in 1891, and his mother married another Estonian nobleman in 1894, which must have pissed this dude off. We're gonna talk about what happened to his dad a little bit, coming up, but yeah, this must have pissed him off. She's also got a type. You can't, no two ways about it. She's got a type, dude. Estonian nobleman, like the shittiest of noblemen too, right? These aren't even. We're not talking about like Germany or like even Russia, like one of like these gigantic empires or whatever. We're talking about Estonia, dude. What's an Estonian? An Estonian nobleman is just a dude with like 8 more potatoes than everyone else. Like 8 more potatoes, and his fucking farm shack is like has another room on it. That's what an Estonian nobleman is. But she married another one. And Russ grew up in an estate in the woods about 40 miles outside of Reval, which is the capital of Estonia. I don't know if I said that. But during his childhood, Russ was extremely cruel to other children and animals. And this dude was like Sid from fucking Toy Story on steroids. Like, and the thing I read, it said that he was such an asshole that even the other bullies hated him. They were like, dude, too far. Bullies in like the fucking 1800s, they were cutting people's heads off and shit. You know, if you've ever seen Stand By Me, like the bullies in that movie have like switchblades and they're like stabbing kids up and shit. So you can imagine what was going on in like 1800s noblemen or like the royalty, the aristocracy. They were fucking dudes up. But during his childhood, at the age of 12, he tried to strangle his cousin's pet owl to death, which is just so funny. This dude just grew up in Game of Thrones. It's like, how can you expect anyone that literally grew up in Game of Thrones? What's that fucking... There's like a character in Game of Thrones who's like, he's like the king or whatever, Joffrey or something like that, and he's like a little fucking kid, and he's the biggest asshole on earth. This is what this guy is. He's just Joffrey from Game of Thrones, but in Russia, which just makes him even more crazy. But he did try to strangle an owl to death, which I feel like is that seems like a pretty easy animal to kill. Like if you can getting your hands on it is like the hardest part, but I feel like once you get your hands on an owl, pretty fucking easy to kill. If you've ever seen like like with the feathers, they do look pretty big. They're like turkey size, like a nice chicken, you know. They do look like they could be a good meal, but once you take all the feathers off of them, there's nothing much there. So I feel like an owl is a pretty, you know. And I guess strangling it probably isn't the best way to kill it, because owls especially, like their necks, like you probably grabbed that owl by the neck and it was probably like, what the fuck is this guy trying to do? Because owls' necks are like fucking, I think they can turn their head like, what is it, like 180 degrees? He probably did nothing. He probably was like shaking it back and forth and the owl felt nothing. But he did try to strangle an owl to death. And this kid had a pet owl. Pretty fucking sick. Pretty sick. And in 1905, Russ was removed from school, and this was like a private, like military type school, I think. It might have not been a military school, but I think it was. He was removed from school by his mother and stepfather and sent to fight the Japanese in Manchuria. And Manchuria is like northeast China, and at the time, Japan was like trying to expand their empire, and they eventually did get Manchuria during like World War II type of times, like the 20s and 30s and shit like that. They might have even got it a little bit earlier, but they sent him to fight the Japanese there. And before that, in 1898, his father was committed to an asylum. And it's like, dude, we were talking about like what has to happen to have like a nobleman and a noblewoman get divorced? What has to happen to have a nobleman committed to an asylum in 1888, dude? Back then it was like all women. Like a chick would get her period and like act kind of bitchy or whatever, and they'd put her in a fucking asylum. They were putting women in asylums for anything, but like dudes, for a dude to end up in an asylum, they would have to like go to war and get PTSD. Back in the day, they were like, "You have PTSD? What the fuck is that, dude? You're just making up letters." They heard like some dude mention PTSD, and they're like, "He's speaking like the devil. The devil has the devil has possessed him, and he's making up words now. Put him in the asylum." But what the fuck did this dude have to do? He probably freaked the fuck out when he found out she got married to another nobleman. He's like, "What did I do? What did I do wrong? Why don't you love me?" So she might have been, you know. And especially like the royal family of Russia, the Romanovs, like that's like the main royal family in Russia. They were fucking everybody, you know, and everything, dude. They were fucking candles, horses, whatever they could get their hands on, they were fucking it. So this is Estonian royalty, so it's probably like a little bit of a step down from that, but she was still probably going hog wild, and he was definitely going hog wild. So we don't know what happened there. He just got committed to an asylum. I don't know. Maybe he tried to strangle too many owls. Maybe he took a page out of his son's book and he was like, "Yeah, it does feel pretty good to strangle an owl to death." They're like, "This guy's killing way too many owls and he's not even eating them, dude. We gotta lock him up for the safety of the owls. The owls must preserve. We gotta lock this dude up." But he got fucking locked up in an asylum. And during the 1905 Russian Revolution, Estonian peasants lynched nobles and burned down their estates. And Russ's family didn't get like lynched or anything, but they did get their house burned down. So, and that fucked them up. And this event reinforced Russ's idea that peasants were inferior. And like a big part of like his belief, like his core belief system, is that nobles are just like inherently superior. He believed that people that were part of monarchies didn't need to answer to peasants. They only needed to answer to gods, or not to gods, to the god. But a funny part of this is that he was like, during his childhood, like a big thing, like I said, he was like fucking obsessed with his like royal blood or whatever. But another thing, a part of that was like, he was like, "We never take orders from peasants, dude. We never listen to them. They don't dictate our life." And they were like, "I'm going to dictate a big part of your life real quick, dude. All I need is a little bit of gasoline and I'll dictate your entire fucking life." So they burned down his house and he was fucking pissed about that, obviously. And after that, he was just like, I'm going to kill all of them. He did go hog wild. He turned from owls to peasants. And he didn't just kill an owl. He tortured a whole bunch of fucking animals when he was a kid, dude. He loved, if you torture anything bigger than like a frog when you're a kid, even a frog, I'd say that's like a step too far. But bugs, obviously every kid tortures bugs, dude. I used to get those big ass grasshoppers, like in the summer and the springtime when the grasshoppers started coming out. I used to pick up the grasshoppers by their hind legs, and like if you've ever thrown like a poppet or one of those things before, I used to like spike grasshoppers into the ground when I was a kid. But I feel like anything, maybe like I'll give you a frog when you're like if you torture one frog when you're a kid, that's all fine and dandy. I feel like I maybe tortured a frog once, or like I fed it to like chickens or something. But like that is like the turning point when you're a little kid and you're like torturing bugs or whatever. You're like making bugs fight. Once you get to like a frog, if you don't feel bad about killing the frog, that's it. It's game over. It's time to put him in the asylum. That should be like a test when you're a little kid. They should like, when you're in like elementary school or whatever, they should put you in like a locked room with like just one, like a little frog just staring at you just mindlessly. See how much the kid tortures the frog, and if he feels bad about it. That's what they should do. Maybe that's why they have kids like dissect frogs when they're in high school. They're like, we're going to see who the real psychopaths are here. We're going to see who the real crazies are. Because I don't know, dissecting a frog though, when I dissected the frog in high school, I was like playing with its intestines and shit, and it smelled like shit, And it didn't smell like poop. It smelled like formaldehyde or whatever, because they give you like a preserved frog. Because obviously if they just hand you like a dead frog from like a fucking pond or whatever, it's gonna give you some crazy disease. So they like soak it in like alcohol and formaldehyde and all that, and so it smelled like shit. But I did fuck with its intestines a little bit. But that's it. The frog's already dead. Who does that job? Who's the person that drowns the frogs in formaldehyde? We gotta lock that dude up. That is a job that like they should give to people on like death row or whatever, just being like, all right, you're gonna drown all the dogs, or not the dogs, the frogs. You're gonna kill all the dogs. They should just have like the most ruthless prisoner being the one that puts down all the dogs. Just like a family putting down its like 18-year-old yellow lab, and a dude with like a bunch of face tattoos walks in. He's like, all right, when do I get to kill the dog? They should have the dudes doing that. That should have been Roman's life, but no. Or Russ. Sorry, not Roman, Russ. And I don't know when he changed his name to Roman. I don't know. But anyway, rich people love changing their names to dumb bullshit, especially like the non-binary rich people. They like love changing their name to like fraud. Whatever. Russ did that, but he changed his name to Roman. And in 1906, he returned from Manchuria, and people don't know whether he like fought the Japanese in Manchuria or not. Obviously, he did claim it, and he did get like a medal for it eventually for like fighting in the Russo-Japanese War, but they don't really know if he like fought in it or not, because the Japanese might have like had it fully occupied by the time he got there, and like the war was basically over by the time he got there. Maybe, we don't really know. And this is like early 1900s, and they still don't know like when the war ended. So yeah, we don't know what was going on there. So you can't even, if you can't trust anything before like 1990, is just, I don't believe it. Or it's not that I don't believe it, it's just like fucking could be true, could be not. There's no way of knowing. Did we really drop those bombs on Japan? Did other certain events in World War II really happen? I don't know. But Russ, if Russ was alive in World War II, especially because he was part of the German royal family, he would have been going hog wild. But anyway, in 1906, he was enrolled at the Pavlovsk military school, where he became obsessed with quote-unquote Tibetan and Hindu philosophy. Basically just Eastern philosophy. These people, they were just like, yeah, he just loves Asian shit. He was basically like a, what's that called, a weeaboo? He was basically like an early 1900s weeaboo that was just obsessed with like Tibetan philosophy, and especially reincarnation. We talked about Buddhism a little bit in the last episode, and dude, I have like 6 pages of notes here, so I'm not going to talk too much about his philosophy, or I didn't write anything down about it, but I'll talk about it a little bit. He was a Messianic Buddhist, and he was like the only dude of this religion. So he was like a Lutheran growing up, right, which is a denomination of Christianity, and he infused that idea with Buddhism somehow, and it's the tantric type of Buddhism. And if you didn't listen to the last episode, tantric Buddhism, they have all like these crazy ceremonies, and they believe in like gods of war and like they have all like these different gods and shit. They're basically like, they got like some Greek god type shit going on. And so that's the type of Buddhist he was. And that's like that's the craziest type of Buddhism. And so he became obsessed with that when he was at this military school. And they said at this military school, he was like a better student. And it was an army school specifically. I think the last school he was at was a Navy one. And they were like, dude, he's not good at this at all. He fucking sucks. He can't stop torturing animals, dude. We got a bunch of horses for the boys to ride. Every time he rides the horses, he fucking shivs them in the back like he's in a prison. But he was pretty good at this school. And after his graduation, he requested to be stationed in Eastern Russia, and this request was granted. And the reason he wanted to be stationed in Eastern Russia, and this is like southeastern Siberia near like Mongolia and all that, he wanted to be stationed there so he could learn more about like Asian philosophy and like specifically Buddhist philosophy. And this request was granted. And while in Siberia, Russ became obsessed with cavalry and nomadic peoples, specifically the Mongols, and like there was one other group called like the Byeruts, which is like a ethnic minority within Mongolia, but they're basically the same thing. They just ride around on horses all day and like fucking chill with yaks. And he was like, dude, that is fucking sick. But he really did love cavalry. Like dudes riding on horses with swords and like cutting each other's heads off and shit. Obviously, dude. It combined his 2 favorite things, animals and cutting things' heads off. And so he fucking loved that shit. And part of his philosophy was that like cavalry was like the ultimate form of like military strategy. And so he became obsessed with it when he was over there. And Russ was known for his heavy drinking and fighting, and once he got slashed across the face by another officer. And yeah, that kind of all happened in Siberia, but there was no wars going on over there. So the animal was caged. He was just like a tiger in like a shitty zoo pen getting like fucking tomatoes thrown at him and shit. That's what he was experiencing over there. So he was just drinking all the time. Did get slashed in the face, or it doesn't say slashed, I think he got like hit by like the back of a dude's sword or something, because it did leave a scar, but it's not like a huge scar across his whole face. And I feel like if you got an open shot at a drunk guy with a sword, if you're going with like the sharp side of it, you're definitely getting like a nice chunk off, dude. You might turn him into Voldemort with that. And it said part of this was like, this fucked him up even more. Like the way the dude hit him with the sword was like so fucking hard to give him like brain damage and like cracked his fucking skull or whatever. Some shit like that. I don't know if it cracked his skull, but it like fucked him up even more than he was already fucked up. All right. So he was a officer within the Russian Royal Army at this time. And so now we're getting into World War I a little bit. From 1915 to 1916, Russ fought in the Eastern Front. And Russ participated in rear action cavalry raids on German troops, which is just, it's, World War I was fucking insane, dude. It's like we still had machine guns, but also dudes were like riding in horses and shit. And so I guess what a rear action raid is like you go behind enemy lines, fuck them up, and then you go back real quick. So it was basically like a Navajo, dude, or like an Apache. I don't know if the Navajo did that. The Apache definitely did. He was basically just an Apache, just riding around on a horse, fucking dudes up. And like, he was what was it called? He played an important part, like a major, he fought in like a very major offensive, or maybe it was a defensive, I don't know. It was like the reoccupation of Eastern Prussia. He was in that during World War I. I don't know anything about World War I, so, but he was there riding around on horses, jumping into trenches. He would, dude, put that dude in a trench with like a mace, because they were fighting with maces in World War I. There was like it was called like a trench club or whatever, but it was basically like a mace. It was like a spiked fucking club, dude. Just give him one of those and let him go hog wild. He'll get himself killed eventually. But it said he felt like at home during like cavalry raids and shit like that, like being in the heat of battle on like the back of a horse, like cutting dudes' heads off and shit. And it said he had no fear of death. So this guy was fucking insane. He was a Mongol. He may have not been related to Genghis Khan, but he, at his heart, was the heart of a Mongol, you know? And while in the Eastern Front, he gained a reputation as a fearless but reckless leader. And Russ was a highly decorated soldier, but he had a lot of disciplinary issues, and he was eventually imprisoned for 2 months for attacking another officer. And at this time, I guess he wasn't like fucking up the soldiers too much. He was just going after other officers, which I can, if you've ever listened to me talk about serial killers, I can respect that. Like, yeah, he's like a torturous fucking insane sadistic asshole, but at least he's going after other dudes on his level. You know, if he was just like torturing like privates and shit, like 17-year-olds who don't even speak Russian, they're from so far out in the Russian Empire, they don't even speak Russian. If he was like torturing those dudes, it'd be like, all right, fucking asshole or whatever. But he's going after everyone, dude. You gotta respect that. You gotta. But in 1917, he got released and was sent to fight the Ottomans in the Caucasus, where he met Grigory Semyonov. And him and Grigory got along pretty well. And if you don't know where the Caucasus are, it's kind of like where Khabib is from, like that middle part in between like the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. I think that's where like the Caucasus are. And it's just like these mountains and shit. He basically went to go fight in the mountains, and he was fighting the Ottomans. And while he was in the Caucasus, the February Revolution occurred, wherein the Romanov family was deposed. And so I guess they had two revolutions. One was the February and one was the October Revolution, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But this was like the communist revolution of Russia, the Bolsheviks, if you've ever heard of that. And this was, historically, it was carried out by Jews, which, or like the Bolsheviks were Jews, which were like the people that like organized this whole thing. I don't fucking know. But it was orchestrated by Russian Jewish people. And so this only like reinforces already very anti-Semitic worldview. And it's very funny that his last name ends in Berg, and he's still anti-Semitic, but I guess he just hated him. He hated himself, dude. He cut himself every day, dude. Like those emo kids that like cut themselves because like, oh, I hate myself. Just a fucking loser. So they like do little bullshit cuts on their arms. He was doing that because he was Jewish. But he fucking hated the Jews. I don't know if he was Jewish or not, but his last name does end in Berg, so I don't know. Let's do some very basic math here. What does 1 and 1 equal? I think it's 2. I could be wrong. They might have changed math a little bit. You know, this is a few hundred years ago, but I'm pretty sure he's Jewish. And anyway, in April 1917, Rush and Semyonov Semyonov began organizing a Christian Assyrian unit as many fled due to the Ottomans' genocide of them. And so the Ottomans were like Muslim or whatever, and Assyrians are people from like Iran. And at this time, he was in like northern Iran, like right on the border between Iran and like Azerbaijan, which is like a mountain country in the Caucasus. And he was like there, and the Christian Assyrians were fleeing. And I think Assyrians, they're not like Arabs or whatever. Like you imagine Iran, and you're like maybe like Persians or whatever. I guess these guys are somehow a different thing than that. And Assyrians are like, pretty sure these guys fought like the Greeks or something like that. But he organized this cavalry unit with them. And after the war, and this cavalry unit wasn't like, it was all right. It was a decent cavalry unit. Nothing crazy, though. But he got them. He rallied the men. He was like, we got to fuck these Ottomans up. Let's fucking go. And so he did form this unit. And after the war, Rus and Semyonov went to Siberia to establish Buryat. This is the other group that I was talking about that like Rus was obsessed with, which is a Mongolian ethnic group. And they went there to form these cavalry units. And the reason I wrote that thing down about the Christian Assyrians is because that, I guess, somehow was the inspiration for forming these cavalry units. And I don't know how the fuck they did that. Because I guess the Bolsheviks or whatever were like, yeah, fucking let these morons go ride horses in like the tundra. I don't give a shit. Just go let them do that. Big mistake by them, though, as we'll talk about right now, because we're talking about the Russian Civil War. After the October Revolution in 1917, Rus joined the White Army, which is the army that supported like the Russian Empire. So it was the Reds versus the Whites. That's what this war was. It was the Wild West. It was whites fighting Reds. And so he joined up with Samoyev to fight the Reds, or Semyonov. In my head, I was calling him a completely different name the entire time, so I'm going to have to adjust to it. But he joined in there to fight the Reds. So it was the White Army versus the Red Army. And Rus and Semyonov fought independently of the rest of the White Army and were funded by the Japanese. And the reason that they fought independently of them is because they were monarchy absolutists. And so while other people in the White Army did not support the Bolsheviks, the Reds, the communists, they didn't support that. They weren't like, we're going to reinstall the monarchy. That is what Rus and Semyonov believed. They were like, we need to fight in order to reinstate the monarchy. And so that's what made him a warlord. I don't know if I said this yet, but like and there was a ton of these different warlords around this area where he was in like northern China, Mongolia, eastern Siberia or whatever. There was like a ton of warlords there just like fucking up communists. Because at the time, the communists were like slowly spreading, like infecting like everything around them, like China and Mongolia and all that. And so they were there just basically fighting communists. That's what these warlords did. They took advantage of this opportunity to like fight communists. And they were supported by like Japan and like some royal families in like China and Mongolia and shit like that. And their whole thing was just fighting communists. And after successful operations in Inner Mongolia, which is in modern-day China, and Siberia, Rus was promoted, I think it was like, I don't know, second general or whatever. They're not even in the army, so I don't know what this promotion meant. I guess Semyonov was like, fucking, this is the best dude I got. I'm just going to let him do whatever. He was sent to form cavalry units. He was sent to like raise his own cavalry units out of like, I don't know, peasants in eastern Siberia. In like Mongolia and China and all that shit. And during this time, Rus began falling more into Buddhism and adopted an ascetic lifestyle. And if you don't know, ascetic, I talked about this in the Buddhism episode, it's like the complete rejection of everything earthly. But like a core tenet of Buddhism is that like that's not the way to go. It's like you can't reject everything earthly. Like that's not going to work. That's not how you get there. I don't know. So I guess he was just, like I said, he completely invented his new religion, his own religion. He's the only one that followed it. So, yeah, he was fucking it. He was torturing owls and shit. What do you expect out of a guy that tortures owls, dude? The wisest animal. And I feel like people think owls are wise because, like, they're not the only bird, but, like, they're one of the only birds with, like, kind of a human face. You know what I mean? Like, their beak looks kind of like a nose and their eyes are facing forward. So I feel like that's why people think owls are like wise, is because they kind of resemble humans. That's how dumb humans are. We're like, that thing kind of looks like me. That thing is kind of like me. It's got to be the smartest one. Like, that's why we hunted whales until like the 1960s or whatever, because we were like, it's a fucking big giant fish. Who gives a shit? And then we found out they're like the smartest, like most caring human animals on Earth, and people were like, this dumb fucking fish, dude. Throw a bunch of harpoons in his back. But anyway, Russ became more and more Buddhist, and I think this is the time when he like fully developed this messianic Buddhism that he followed. And Rus and Semyonov grew apart due to Semyonov's public affair with a Jewish cabaret singer. And also the reason, it wasn't just because she was Jewish, that was a big fucking part of it though, but it was also because he viewed Semyonov as like a hedonistic guy, like a dude who was like attached to like his carnal desires or whatever, which is very ironic because Russ was a psychopath who enjoyed torturing people for fun. So it's very ironic that he was like, you fucked a chick outside of your marriage. You piece of shit, I'd never do anything like that. I'd just remove all of a dude's skin while he's still alive and then eat his eyeballs, but I'd never cheat on my wife. And he wasn't even married at this time. I don't think. He might have been married, but I don't think he was. And so Russ formed the Asiatic Cavalry Division to fight the Reds. And this was like a division, it was mostly made up of like these nomadic peoples from, you know, Siberia, like the plains of Eastern Asia and shit like that. There was a few Japanese people in there, and this wasn't just a bunch of dudes on horses. They had like rifles and machine guns, and I think it said they had a couple of artillery pieces. So he was doing decent, you know what I mean? He's an up and coming warlord. He's like the mom and pop of warlords right now. You know, he's not like if America or like the Russian army, like the main, like the Bolshevik army, if that's like the Walmart of this shit, he's like a little mom and pop shop at this point. But he's still fucking him up, especially like this is his home territory. He's been there since like what, like Eastern Asia, Eastern Russia. He's been there since like 1906. So he's been there for a while at this point in 1917. And at this time, once he created this division of people, the Asiatic Cavalry Division, aka the ACD, he also made a bunch of fortresses and shit, and these fortresses were known as torture centers, and he even executed his own executioner, and he went completely fucking insane at this time. He was like super paranoid, and that's why he killed his own executioner, because he like, I don't know, thought he was killing people without his consent. I don't know, but he killed this guy. So he went fully fucking schizophrenic, like fully insane at this point. And near the end of the war, Russ began ingratiating himself with monarchist Chinese leaders and married the Princess of Manchuria. And the reason he married her, I guess he did love her. Like I said, he was a weeaboo, so he was like, I can't wait to marry a Japanese woman. And Asian women are so much better than Western white women. So that probably was part of his motivation, but it was also political, because he was like, I need these guys to like help me reinstate the monarchy. And at this time, he's like, fuck it, we're not going to get Russia. We got to reinstate the monarchy somewhere else. And so he had like this whole big plan. He was going to like organize all the monarchist people, like people within monarchies. That's part of it, but also people that supported monarchies. He was like going to get them all together and like fuck people up and reinstate the monarchy within Mongolia. That was his goal at this point. And so now we're on to the restoration of Outer Mongolian independence. And after the Civil War, Russ broke his allegiance from Semyonov and began his plan to restore a monarchy in Mongolia. He turned the ACD into maybe part of it. I don't know if he turned the whole thing into it, but he turned part of it, at least, into a guerrilla fighting force and began brutally training them. Like for real. This isn't like some Navy SEAL like Jocko fucking, I'm gonna make these dudes hard. You know, he wasn't giving a Goggin speech to these guys. He was like beating them with like a regular punishment was like, and he was doing this to officers. He wasn't doing this just to like regular dudes within the army. He was doing worse to those guys, but he would fucking like beat the shit out of them with like bamboo sticks and stuff. He also executed like I was saying, he wasn't doing this to like regular people within the army. He was just executing the regular people within the army he didn't like. He was just killing them, and they still stayed loyal to it. And part of this is one of those things where it's like, people look at this guy and they don't agree with what he did, so they're like, he was a shitty leader. He was just an awful military leader, and he didn't know what he was doing. But these guys stayed loyal to him after he was like executing them and torturing them en masse. So it's like, I don't know. Maybe he was like a decently. If you can keep someone after that, you got to be doing decent. But it's also like, what else are these guys gonna do? They're gonna like go out. They're gonna just abandon like getting money and like training and like a house from this guy to fucking go tough it out in the taiga. the tundra of Russia. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe like these dudes had like literally no other option, so they had to stay with Russ. But I don't know. You must pretty good leader. But at this time, Mongolia was occupied by the Chinese, and I don't know. I was kind of confused by this, and obviously this whole thing is just a big giant butt fuck. It was just a bunch of warlords fighting each other and shit. But I guess it was occupied by the Chinese, but not a ton of them. We're gonna talk about how he captured the Mongolian capital from the Chinese, but it said there was only like 7,000 Chinese troops within the capital at that time, which is way more than Russ had. It was like 4 times as many people as he had. He had about 1,500 people, and so. But yeah, I guess they weren't too serious about Mongolia. They were like, you know. I wonder if like when the Chinese captured the Mongolians, if they were just like, if they were like as racist as like America is, and they're like, fucking, we're the same thing. You guys can just stay here. Like, I don't care that you guys are occupying us. You have small eyes and eat noodles. It's the same thing. But anyway, Russ ordered an assault on the Mongolian capital, which at this time was called Urga, but it's the same capital they have now, which is Ulaanbaatar, but at the time it was called Urga. And so he ordered an assault on the capital, which failed, and made him retreat to Setsen Khan Imag, which is like this area, and like I think it's in Manchuria, or it might be in Mongolia. It's like right on the border between like China and Mongolia, like out in the steppe somewhere. And this area was ruled by princes who supported Mongolian independence. And so obviously they were like, these fucking Chinese people are coming in here. They're going to overthrow our government. We're going to get completely fucked by it. So they were like, this crazy dude's going to go kill all of them for us. And sounds like a plan to me. Sounds like a good one. Yeah, good luck with that, dude. They gave him the thumbs up to go fuck him up. And he did. He did fuck him up. There's no two ways about it. And during this time there, he received Bogd Khan's blessing to free Mongolia. And at this time, Bogd Khan, he was like, I think they call him like the last Khan or something. And this guy's part of like the Genghis Khan lineage. And so his name is Bogd Khan. And he was the spiritual and secular leader of Mongolia. So he was like the Buddhist leader, like their religion revolved. He was kind of like the Pope, right? Like how the Pope, especially in like the old days, like the Crusades and shit, had his own army, and he was also like the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church. That's what Bogd Khan is to Mongolia. He's basically like the Pope of Mongolia. And Russ launched another offensive on the capital, and this time it succeeded. And at this time, Bogd Khan was being kept on house arrest in the capital, and like the first part of their plan is they went in there and they got him out, and then they fucked the capital up. And it said like when he was like attacking the capital and like trying to seize it back from the Chinese, he used like tactics from Genghis Khan. Like that's how good Genghis Khan was at fighting, is that 500 years later, 400 years later, his tactics were still viable within a war. Like people had fucking machine guns, and Russ was still using Genghis Khan tactics. And I think one of the tactics was he ordered his men. So the capital city is like kind of surrounded by mountains or whatever. Like there's some taller hills around there. And so he was just like, start a bunch of fucking campfires so they think there's like 10,000 of us. That'll like intimidate them. And then when they're nice and scared, we can go in there and fuck them up. That was like the main strategy he used, was just making more campfires. And that's how fucking dumb, like, I guess war, like, as a whole is, you can kind of say it's fucking stupid. You know what I mean? Like, just killing people, especially, like, as an American, it's pretty easy to say that, because basically every war we've had since, like, the 1960s is like, why are we doing this? What's the reason behind doing this? Specifically, I was going to say the war strategy back then was just complete idiocracy. And even now it still is. Like, people talk about, like, trench warfare like it's some old, ancient, archaic thing. It's still, like, a very viable way to do things, because it's like you can't shoot through like miles and miles of earth. You're not going to shoot someone who's hiding in a trench unless you get right up on them, in which case they're just going to like sit back there and like gun you down as you try to get to them. So, I mean, trenches are still viable even today. But we're not going to talk about that, dude. If Vladimir Putin had Russ right now, he'd have Ukraine in about 2 weeks. Russ would go straight on horseback to Kiev and fucking lop Zelensky's 5'7" head ass off. He might not even be able to reach him from the top of a horse with his sword. That's how short little Zelensky is. It's so funny shitting on short people when you're short. Just being like, you subhuman piece of trash. And I'm probably shorter than Zelensky, so. And that is an advantage. If a dude on a horse can't cut your head off with a sword because you're that short, that is an advantage in war. And that's like also an advantage in the trenches and shit. Like all like those 6-footers have to walk around with like their heads hunched or whatever. Not me, dude. I'm walking full proud. I'm walking on my tippy toes and shit. You know what I mean? I'm jumping and touching the top of the trench like it's the top of a door jam, dude. That's what I'm doing in the trench. And so Russ launched another offensive on the capital, and this time it was successful. And so he went in there, he fucked shit up, and the Chinese were like, fuck, we got to get out of here. And so in response to that, Russ and the ACD hunted down and destroyed any remaining Chinese troops. So he immediately like captured the capital, and he just started fucking, he was like, it's done, it's over, there's no more war left. Oh, the fun is over. And they were like, no, dude, they're still like out there. And he's like, yes, dude, I'm so excited to do this. And he was like a warlord, but he had like a ton of shit. He had a secret police force, and I don't know how secret the fucking police force was, because it talked about how once they captured the Mongolian capital, the Mongolians were like, holy shit, dude, we are so fucking back. We got these dudes, they're helping us out. And immediately like the secret police and like the troops of the ACD like started like looting and like just killing anyone that they thought was a communist. And it was also like they would just kill a dude and they would be like, why'd you kill him? And he was like, because he was a communist. But Russ, he did put the kibosh on that, but like kind of not really. And also at this time, Russ was like he was a insane psychopath. He was also kind of a solid dude, because there's this story about how he found out that people were assaulting the nurses, like the triage nurses, like the people that were taking care of like the wounded soldiers, and he just like killed them all. He's like, guys, we can't be doing that. So I don't know. He's I don't think he's that shitty of a dude. He was just a crazy guy who was trying to reinstate the monarchy. He did torture thousands of people, which I feel like the whole like killing people who assaulted the nurses, I feel like that is negated by torturing and killing a bunch of people, but I don't know. And he was also, his anti-Semitism did still exist, but obviously there's not a whole ton of them in Mongolia, so I think they only got like probably under 100 Jews, like in Mongolia and like Siberia and shit like that. So he got a few of them, but nothing new. He probably killed more of his own soldiers than he did Jews. And he killed the Jews not because they were Jewish. He probably didn't give a shit about that. He was completely on his own wavelength at this point. He was probably like, I'm the only one who's right about religion, so I don't give a shit that the Jews do this. He killed the Jews because the entire like communist revolution, the Bolshevik revolution in Russia, was carried out or was led. The Bolsheviks were a Jewish group of people. So, he was like, fucking, we just got to kill all these guys. And Mongolia is now under the rule of Bagd Khan at this point. And Russ would go on to be an independent warlord, but he was an independent warlord, but he fought in the interest of the Mongolian monarchy, and he would go around killing suspected communists, like I said. And so they were like, I mean, this dude got the whole thing back for us, so we got to let him do whatever he wants. But he didn't get it back for long. I think Bagd Khan died in 1924. So I don't know how fucking long the Mongolian monarchy lasted, but we're talking 3 years max, because he recaptured the capital in 1921, and then Bagd Khan died in 1924. So we're talking 3 years of monarchy rule max, all that but that still is impressive, because the ACD, like I said, was only like 1,500, maybe 2,000, like at its peak 2,000 dudes, and it probably got to 1,500 because he killed all the other dudes within it. But I mean, 2,000 people fighting the entire Chinese army, and he was still funded by the Japanese at this time, and so he did have that support going for him. But I mean, for a dude with 2,000 dudes, that's pretty impressive, using the Genghis Khan tactic. For a dude with 2,000 people using medieval war tactics, I mean, I don't know, pretty fucking impressive to me at least. But shortly after this, the Red forces started invading Mongolia, and they did go there to depose the monarchy, but they also went in there to kill Russ, because they were like, fuck, dude, we got to take this dude out. He's going too hog wild. And he was also fucking them up during the Russian Civil War. Like, during the Russian Civil War, he was like capturing all like these rail outposts in eastern Siberia and shit like that, and so they couldn't really do a whole lot out there. And it's also like, do you want to do a whole lot out there? like I talked about, like with Russia being the biggest country in the world, it's like there's people in Russia that don't know they live in Russia. So it's like they got the most land for sure, but like this, I don't know. I feel like going through all this effort to kill a guy who's like controlling the shittiest part of like the worst part of the entire world. I feel like going out there to kill that guy, you're doing too much. But they did. They got him and they captured him and they executed him after a mock trial. And so that's the end of Russ. But I don't know. The Russ I know would never surrender, and he definitely wouldn't go on trial. He definitely would like make a shiv in prison and try to fight his way out. So my conspiracy theory, we are going to have a conspiracy theory this episode. Russ was not executed. That wasn't the real Russ. You know, this is like a Jeff Epstein type shit. Russ is still alive, and he's in, where do they always say he's in? Like Puerto Rico. Whatever, they're always like, Jeffrey Epstein is alive in Puerto Rico. He's there. He's speaking Spanish in Puerto Rico. He's listening to loud music on a Bluetooth speaker in Puerto Rico. That's my idea. Russ is still alive. He's in Puerto Rico. He's 140 years old. And he's just itching to get back out there, dude. He's the one that's still pulling the strings behind the scenes. But, yeah. Roman von Ungern-Sternberg. Russ. Our boy. He did it. He got the monarchy. You can't say he didn't do what he wanted to do. He didn't get the Russian one back, but like he was never gonna fucking do that. You know, that was a pipe dream. He did get the Mongolian one back though. You know, that's like playing. That's like, you know, that's like winning like a D1 championship. He won the NCAA tournament. He didn't make it to the NBA. He had like a short career in the NBA. He averaged like 2 points and like half a rebound a game in the NBA, but like he still made it to the NBA. That's still fucking impressive. You know what I mean? He's still, you know, fucked up the communist Bolshevik army in Eastern Russia. So yeah, can't be too pissed at him, but that's all I've got for this episode. Hope you have a good day, good week, good year, good life, and I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Peace.